Hello. This is a perfect opportunity for me to actually try to reorganize everybody. But hello, chat. Welcome. I've got three very lovely guests and my couch, apparently. No single episode of this doesn't come without its struggles, and the fact that currently, as we're looking at things, I guess Forrest Minish is Alec, and Forrest, or no, she's also.
And Miss Fushi.
Yeah, you're like two different people.
Oh. Shout out to Miss Fushi.
Yeah, a little bit of an identity crisis. She was on the last episode. Welcome everybody. This is Laughingboy LP, and before we get started with our episode, I like to do a little Q&A session. This is just for everybody who joins the streams live. So this is kind of ask me anything. If you want to talk about the topic, we're going to be talking about difficulty in gaming. But you can also just ask us how we're doing. Obviously, nothing super personal. But if you guys have any... Well, look, if you want, that's fine with me.
No, I mean, I'm an open book, but who knows? People can get creative, and maybe I'll eat my words.
That's right. That's right. So yeah, chat, open up to questions. If you want to talk about anything, ask us how we're doing. Ask us what our plans are for... Actually, that's a pretty good question already. Hold on. Hold on. Let me
ask it.
Ask it. I will. Not only will I ask it, but I'll click on it.
Oh.
And then once I get this overlay working, because it broke again. I like this overlay, but it breaks.
It is a nice overlay.
There it is.
Mm-hmm.
There it is. So Cosmokoi asks, how do you guys know each other?
Ooh.
I think the easiest way to answer that question is that they all know me.
That is true. It's the common thread.
I was going to say, Alec and Rebecca, have you guys done anything, like, on one of my streams?
I think we've been on your streams together before.
Yeah, that's what I was getting at.
Yep.
Hold on.
And then I know Shesez just from like your videos and Twitter and.
Well, I know you from your epic Twitter posts, so. Yeah.
Thank you.
Number one.
And then.
I think this is the first time you and I have like collabed on anything before.
I think so. Yeah, I know that you popped in one of my streams before, which was really cool, and I appreciate that. But yeah, I think this is the first time we've actually done anything, unless somehow we both forgot that we were like on a Good Vibes Gaming stream or something. I don't know.
Love those guys.
That's about all I got. And well, she says you and I technically. How did we meet?
Well, I kind of got involved with Zelda Universe, and so, I was hanging out with them a lot.
That's right.
Yeah, and at a certain point, it was at MagFest, you crossed paths with me and mentioned that you were from, Zelda Universe, I think, at the time. Mm-hmm. And then we shared a beer, and we just chatted about literally anything, which was fun, and, it felt good. And I was like, this guy's good people, so... I was like, I'll keep him around because, it didn't seem like you were like, hey, let me give you my business card or anything like that. It was just straight up, just nice casual conversation. I really appreciated that out of a sea of people that normally see me as like a product or something like that. So yeah, that's basically how the two of us have stayed in contact.
A really good thing I didn't have my business cards that day.
I haven't gotten one of those.
Because they're so outdated, I actually need to get new business cards. Andrew had business cards. That's Kyle. Andrew had business cards.
Had.
They're a concept currently.
They were they're in a new concept phase. Well, it's like it references a channel that I had back when I started doing like Let's Plays, and I don't do that anymore. So, and then, Rebecca, I guess you and I met because of Zelda Universe 2.
I think so.
Basically. And
Zelda Universe brings people together.
Apparently, since 2002? 3? It's
something
like that. It's been a while.
And
I guess
20 years.
Alec, I think is you and I are the only people that didn't know each other. Oops, excuse me.
Via
Zelda universe.
How did that happen then? Because I don't remember. I'm bad at remembering connections. Like how that happened.
I'm trying to think about that because you and I met just because. Well, no, it wasn't even through Trevino. I just remember like you and I were talking, or no. I remember you kind of showing up in different places, and then I think at some point you just kind of reached out to me to like play something, or I reached out to you to join me on something because I kept seeing your face, and I was like, oh, okay.
Sounds on brand.
Sounds on brand. It gets to a point where I do have trouble remembering everything, so there's that.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Kyle asks, how's my throat? It's doing better. I can talk now.
You had throat problems too.
I had real bad throat
You don't
problems.
sound like you have been sick. You said you were sick. You sound good. Hopefully you're feeling as good as that.
Wait until tomorrow. So my problem is that I'll get sick and then I'll sound like I'm not sick. As soon as I start recovery mode, I sound like death. There's no in between. I promise you.
Well, don't push yourself too hard.
Yeah, well.
Save your energy.
I need my strength.
Yeah, there's a bug going around. There's a couple of people that I've seen now say that they're sick, and I got sick the past 2 days too. Yesterday being the worst day, and I'm kind of like on the mend right now. So
I think like after Easter, when everybody's together, and then everything gets spread around, and then like the days after, everybody's gets sick.
Oh, maybe.
it's that dang Easter bunny. Never got a shot.
God dang Easter Bunny again. Hold on. I just realized, yes, somebody was right. Technically, Rebecca did take up half of Alex's.
I'm being dragged. I'm being drugged.
You're getting dragged in the comments, man. Again.
Speaking of the Easter Bunny, I work at an elementary school, and I have a student who, is of the age where she believes in the Easter Bunny, and she told me today that she told me, hey, did you know that the Easter Bunny steals from stores? Because in my Easter basket, there was still a price tag on one of the things. And he must have
common mistake.
From the store. Oops. I was like, oh, how do you know he didn't buy it from the store? And she goes, well, there was no receipt, so clearly he stole it.
Oh, man.
Wow.
That's priceless. Poor parents got put on the spot there.
That happened to me with my parents. Like, my parents accidentally left like a Kmart sticker on one of the toys we got from Santa. And we were like,
Santa shops at Kmart.
Apparently Santa shops at Kmart. Let's see.
Santa's on a budget this year.
Orrin asks, Alec, where are my donuts?
Oh my god. Not this again. Next question.
I don't have any more questions, Alec. Answer.
Where can I see the chat? Is it
let me send
on the YouTube.
Let me send you the YouTubes.
Yeah.
Although I did I posted the tweet if you guys want to signal boost that as well. Hold on.
Thank you.
I did post it in our message, our group Discord thingy. There you go.
Is it the one from earlier? Wait.
No, we're live now.
Oh, I didn't get. Okay, I see.
Yes.
It's like a reply to the first one.
Yes.
Right.
Indeed.
I see now with my eyes.
You're special.
I want to answer more questions.
I was thinking that, and I'm so glad you said that.
Well, Cosmic Koi asks, what games are you playing right now?
Ooh, can I answer first?
Yes, you may.
Go for it.
Because I am playing for review Advance Wars 1 and 2 Reboot Camp.
Why?
And I have finished the first game, and I'm starting the second game, and it is surprisingly fun. I am not used to tactical games. I'm usually not like into things like Fire Emblem or strategy games, because normally I don't like to think hard when I'm playing games, and that'll probably come up in our discussion about difficulty. But it's been a lot of fun, and my review comes out next week. So look forward to that if you are interested in the game.
That's so
That's
cool.
what I've been playing.
Very cool.
Gonna be doing
I'm pretty
some additional
jealous.
adjusting.
I didn't play the original, so this was all new to me.
Oh, same. I'm excited for the new one. Well, the remake. So that's really cool that you got an early copy. For me, I've just been playing Resident Evil 4 remake. I just finished it. So yeah, that was really good. Super good. There's a lot of discussion about whether or not it's better than the original, and I guess it's subject to opinion. But for me, in my 2 cents, I actually think that it is like a replacement for the original. I think if I ever need to go back to RE4 remake or RE4 in general, I'll probably play remake in the future.
That speaks
awesome.
highly of it, because the original is such a good game.
Yeah, and you know what? It doesn't stray too far. I think that's what makes it, a solid remake, because it's just visually way more impressive, and it's got a couple of tweaks to make it a little bit more comfortable, and the delivery of the lines. That's probably the most subjective part, but for me, it's a little more straight instead of perpetually goofy like in the last one, and so it kind of fits my style just a little bit better. And yeah, I love it.
Yep.
Great.
Alec, what about you?
Exactly what I'm doing.
Ooh, nice.
And I've played the original. I've played so much of remake. I think I'm pretty close to like 60 hours or something at this point. And I think I'm right there with Shesez here in that I feel like in almost every way this remake is better than the original. And I don't feel like I'm saying that just because I'm like, one of like the Capcom creators or whatever, but I think it's genuinely just really, really good. And Capcom, more than I feel like any other studio in the industry currently, has a really good idea of what makes a remake a good remake and what properties to, sort of include when retelling a story.
Yes.
Pretty much every remake, apart from 3, which is kind of divisive, has, in my opinion, just kind of improved the source material in almost every way.
I absolutely agree with that. Yeah.
Yeah.
I think in general, Capcom has just been killing it with keeping their ear close to the ground when it comes to what the fans want. It seems that they're not doing the whole. There's like some publishers just gonna have. Does feel like they do a lot more to service the fan base, while at the same time just releasing things with stupidly good quality. So super. I again always happy with what Capcom puts out, even in their like lower years, like the DMC remake or reboot years. There was still some good.
Yeah.
I know
Good
those were probably
times.
the worst years, but they still had some good smaller budget titles like Bionic Commando Rearmed and DuckTales Remastered and stuff.
Ooh, I like DuckTales Remastered. That was such a fun game.
Stupidly good. I loved it so much. Got the original voice cast, Alan Young, before his unfortunate passing. May he rest in peace. So that was awesome. I loved that.
Agree. What about you, Andrew?
God, I'm actually doing a couple of things right now because I have apparently a really bad attention problems. So I started doing Astral Chain like late last year, maybe a little bit early this year. It's good.
Okay.
It's a little bit complex, but it's pretty good. And then I got to the post game, got bored, and now I am trying to finish Horizon Forbidden West. And that game is too much game.
Too much game.
It's the best way to describe it. There are so many things that you have to do. There's so many things that you have to like. There's like such a large gameplay loop that it gets a little bit exhausting. So there are just times where I'm just kind of like, I have maybe like 2 hours to play video games today. And in the 2 hours, I got nothing done.
That's fair.
So that gets really frustrating.
Man.
But otherwise, like, there's that. And then I started touching up on Bravely Default because I finished Sonic Lost World, and that game is awful. game is 100% awful. I hated every minute of it, but I beat it.
Man.
So I finished Lost World, and I was like, I need a win. Like, I need an easy win on the 3DS. And I just was like looking through my crate, and I saw Bravely Default, and I was like, I know that this game is like contentious. Like, some people really, really like the entirety of it, and some people don't like certain aspects of it. But I just wanted to get through Default and Second so I could start Bravely Default 2, because that train of sequels isn't hard to understand.
Yeah.
So now I'm just going through those like 3 games at the moment, and just whatever I can get my grubby little hands on at the time, that's what I'll be playing.
Are you enjoying Bravely Default?
It's scratching that itch. It actually is like, it's doing that old JRPG thing, and I like that old boomer JRPG thing, so I'm all about it.
If you like that old boomer JRPG thing, you should try Live Alive.
I actually have to finish it. I'm like most of the way through. 2023 is going to be the year that I like finish a bunch of games that I started.
That was why
every year.
That's why I liked Bravely Default, was that at the time there was just a drought of anything like the Final Fantasy VI formula of like go into a random battle, get some experience points, get an airship, fly around the overworld map kind of thing. There was like a lot of things where it's like, oh, select the chapter or select a drop point, where you can walk down an endless hallway or something, but it was never quite the same as it was back like on the Super Nintendo or PlayStation 1 and stuff. So like with Bravely Default coming out when it did, it was like you just said, it scratched that itch.
Mm-hmm.
And it was funny because that's why I wanted to ask you if you liked it, because I feel like now there's a pretty healthy selection of similar RPGs to choose from. So like Bravely Default now kind of has to like compete with these other JRPGs to see if it really holds up. And I would say Live Alive has like that great amount of charm to it.
Yeah.
Like I love the prehistoric era chapter. That one was like really fun.
That was actually a lot of fun.
But like Bravely Default, again, there's so many, like, it has great music, it's got the overworld map, and some of the characters are a little charming. The only thing that it falls flat for me is just that the characters are a little bit one-dimensional, and the stories, it's okay, it just kind of, it's gameplay driven story where it's like, oh, okay, you got to fight this knight so you can get the knight job class, and like it's kind of just clearly the job class was thought of first, and then the story around it was thought of second in some cases. So but ultimately, like once you get to the end of the game, it's like, wow, definitely worth your time, I felt. And I beat Bravely Second like 3 years ago, and that one was really good too. I liked it. It was just, Ring a Bell is not one of the characters you get to play as. I don't think it's a big spoiler, but yeah, sadly they cut him out in favor of Tiz and shoot, what's the blonde woman from the game?
Adia?
Yeah, Adia.
Which I thought was a fun name just because of Final Fantasy VIII.
Oh, what's the connection there?
I'm pretty sure that the main antagonist's name is Adia.
Oh, really?
If I remember correctly. Chat, correct me if I'm wrong. It's been a hot minute. But pretty sure. Anyway, let's take out this one last question again from Cosmic Koi. Any games from the past you'd want to see a remake or remaster of?
Oh, yes.
Yeah.
Quite a few, I'd say.
Yeah, there are.
Sorry, I'm just like constantly resizing and looking at things. I think honestly,
No, that's good.
I want an HD 2D remaster of Chrono Trigger.
Yes, that's what I was gonna say.
That would be really good. Yeah.
I was gonna say, Jesus, that might be your answer too.
I don't think that game needs it, but I want it.
I would say it doesn't. So like I would be fine with an HD 2D remake, but like as far as really elevating it beyond what it was originally, I feel like a full 3D remake would be kind of cool, where it still kind of goes down the same scenarios, story scenarios and everything, and the gameplay can remain largely unchanged and all that. But I would just love to be able to have a full 3D environment where I can rotate the camera and see like the Millennial Fair from all angles and stuff
Oh,
like
that
that.
would be cool.
Yeah,
That'd be
I'd
very
like
cool.
that.
I
Maybe
wouldn't-
voice acting too. That'd be
Yeah.
nice.
And it would be nice if like I honestly think they could take the 7 remake engine and battle system. And I know that Chrono Trigger's battle style was a little bit different, but I feel like they could hack it if they wanted to go 3D.
Or how about this? Final Fantasy. I'm sorry, not Final Fantasy. Dragon Quest 11.
Oh yeah, because
It even has the same art style. Akira Toriyama.
that's true too. They could definitely easily get away with that.
See, I just have such a soft spot for sprite artwork that
Yeah.
like that's why I want an HD 2D
yeah.
remake. Like I mean 3D games obviously are, so good, but it would be cool to see the Chrono Trigger world in that style.
Mm-hmm.
But I miss games with sprite artwork.
Heck yeah.
What
We just
about
need more of that, honestly. We need new
Yeah.
games. Like it
New
would be great
games
to have
with
a
that. Yes.
Chrono Trigger sequel with like a sprite
Mhm.
artwork. That'd be amazing.
Yeah.
Yep.
So if I was to pick a different answer from Chrono Trigger, because I think that would have been my answer, Super Mario RPG would be a good one.
Okay.
Like, or
That's a
just
good
a remaster for that one, where like the 3D artwork is hyper HD instead of downscaled to hell.
I
to
think
the point where it's so crunchy looking now by today's standards.
there was an artist on Twitter that I think even tried to make a concept of what it would look like if it were sort of that like Kirby Canvas Curse or Rainbow Curse claymation
Ooh,
instead of
yeah.
pure 3D. And I kind of really like that. I know they tried to do the same thing with some people try to recreate Earthbound in the same style because based on the character clay models. But honestly, I think that could work for Mario RPG 2. Yeah, that's also a really good one.
Sure, yeah.
I love
I
playing.
mean, my
that game.
answers are boring. It's just basically all the golden age RPGs from the Super Nintendo. Any one of those being remade would be great. Yeah.
I think we're similar with
That
that.
is in some ways a surprise that they haven't been, or at least
Because they're
re-released.
timeless. They're perfect the way they are.
So-
You're not
that's
gonna get a better
true.
Link
I
to
mean-
the Past. You're not gonna get a better Super Metroid. Let's be real.
I think if a game, honestly, one of the games that I think has to have one or should have one, I really want Zelda 2 to just be remade to be a more traditional-ish Zelda game. And apparently they had tried to do it, and I can't remember what game that wound up becoming, or if it actually wound up becoming a game at all. I just remember there's an old interviewer, I think Miyamoto had said oh, I wanted to do a remake of Zelda 2. And then it became something completely different. That's the one game where I'm that needs it. Or the original Persona really needs a complete overhaul.
Question is, with a Zelda 2 remake, would they still do the gameplay that they had in that game, or would they see that as a mistake and try to make it more traditionalized Zelda, but with the world and sort of the locations of Zelda 2, so that someone that maybe didn't like the gameplay of Zelda 2, and I'm only advocating for someone that's not me because I actually like the gameplay of Zelda 2, but I'm thinking
When you say gameplay, do you mean still side-scrolling or
right, or
down?
changing it to the top down, a Link to the Past style gameplay,
Yeah. I
Just
think the
kinda
one
take,
the big thing for me is with the item system, it's so different. I don't even mind the leveling up part of it or how health is different or things like that. That could easily be changed, but yeah, I think the fact that it's not traditional in that sense with items and whatnot.
Yeah. Or, I mean, personally, again, a Zelda 2 remake that doesn't take that dramatic shift, I would totally be in favor for. And there's so many little things that, for as much as I like the game, they're just stuff that I'm yeah, we didn't necessarily need to lose all our experience points when we get a game over or,
Yeah.
or get sent all the way back to
To the beginning.
yeah, that's not necessary.
Right.
Or
That would
or
never
just-
fly today.
It would be really cool if, if you see a Dark Knight holding a shield above his face, that you logically stab his knees and it actually works instead of him immediately snapping to block that too. That was what would be really cool. But Honestly, like I think that Zelda 2 is still one of the most interesting Zelda games. I would hate to see it like drastically changed, but
I could.
I
Oh, I was gonna say I could just honestly see Nintendo kind of doing a like a middle ground where it plays like it starts to play as a traditional Zelda game, but they introduce a mechanic that can like sort of like Super Paper Mario where you can like change dimensions. So I wonder if they could do something like that where they would just have it like, oh yes, you can also do like 2D and you can uncover things that way. So like you can just change the camera perspective and that would be like the main mechanic, kind of how like I guess A Link Between Worlds allows you to
I
travel
was gonna
between
say,
two
sounds
different.
like Link Between
Yeah.
Worlds.
So
I was gonna say, to me, it sounded like Fire Emblem almost, except, obviously it's not strategy based. It's more like you walk around the world like a traditional Zelda, and then when you engage in a battle, the camera just kind of warps
Shifts, yeah.
into a different type of perspective. So yeah. I mean, like, there's so much possibilities with that game. I think that would be a fantastic thing to just remake, and because, like, honestly, no matter which direction they go, I'd be on board. I'd be like, okay, we have the original game. If they decide to take a drastic turn, or it's like this game could definitely be drastically improved upon if they decide to stick with the gameplay that it showcased with. So yeah, that's a really good answer.
Alec, you've been a little quiet on this.
Well, to be honest, I'm pretty light on RPGs, and over my time of being a gamer, I played a few, but they're not necessarily my forte, which kind of explains what my picks end up being. They're definitely not like masterpieces or like just world-renowned classics or anything like that. My picks come from the DS library. There's two. And they're just for me. I don't know if anybody else even remembers these games. Well, except for one. The first one is Elite Beat Agents. I would love to see a remake of that game. Again, that's probably just for me. I'm probably the only person that still cares about Elite Beat Agents. I think it'd be really fun to revisit that game, especially with licensed material, because the original game had a lot of covers and some of them were bad. Just saying. But
I do remember this.
okay, good. I'm not the only one.
I worked at a GameStop throughout most of the DS's lifespan, so I remember a lot of the DS.
Yeah, no, that game was like one of my favorites from the DS era, as far as things that aren't Zelda or Mario. And the other one's Nintendogs. What the heck? Where is Nintendogs?
I want a Nintendogs mobile game, like in kind of like Pokemon
Right?
Go, where it has a pedometer and I can take my dog
Yeah.
for walks. And like, I'm not like trying to advocate for microtransactions here, but like that kind of game screams microtransactions for an app, like with different dog breeds and toys and accessories. And like, I'm surprised that hasn't happened yet.
It's doable.
100%.
Yeah.
Especially like you can integrate it from smartphones within like some people have like Apple Watches or Android, whatever.
My little dog everywhere.
can
Gotta
have,
feed
like,
him.
yeah.
It's time to feed. Yeah.
That'd be
You can do
cool.
steps
It
or
would be really a
something.
neat idea that kind of got inspired by something you just said earlier. Is like if they made it a mobile game, but you could buy physical things for the mobile app, like a dog tag pedometer that allowed, like it kind of encourages you to actually interact with your real life dog while also
That'd be cool.
it does cool things for you in the app too. Yeah.
That would be cool.
Or you
There's
could
some
even
potential here.
you could
Yeah.
do something like that, but in you'll be able to connect it to the Switch, like the Pokeball Plus. It's like how you would keep your Pokemon in the Pokeball, and then you'd walk around and play Pokemon Go. So like you could actually have an app on your phone and a Switch game, and then you can just like take them. You can take them out of the Switch game into like the like a plastic dog collar that you can like wear on your belt or something, and then it just walks with you, and then it barks at other dogs. Who needs Street Pass?
I love it.
All right.
Yeah.
I'm gonna go ahead. So we're gonna start the episode. Just give us like 2 minutes. We're gonna start our audio recording for the audio podcast version. Again, if you are seeing this, then you're on the YouTube channel. If you're not seeing this, you're not. But we like to do a little Q&A session before we start the episode, just to get chat going. And just give us like 2 seconds. We'll start our audio recording, and then we'll go ahead and start the show. Be right back.
Cool.
Hold on. Let me hit the be right back button. Where is it? There it is.
Shout out to him wherever he is.
He's happy you waved. Hello, everybody, and this is Laughingboy LP, and welcome to another fantastic episode 41 of DialogBOX. I am joined by three very lovely guests. First off, she is a staff writer at Twinfinite, host of the Nintendo Shack podcast, and part of PSVG. Is that still true? I just copy pasted from an older episode.
Still doing that.
You can find her on Twitter and Twitch at Forrest Minish. We have Rebecca Stone. Welcome.
Hello. Thank you so much for having me.
Up next, we have Nintendo Ambassador. You can find him streaming on twitch.tv/AlecandStuff. It's AlecandStuff. Hello.
That's me. Yes. Hi.
And then
Hello.
finally, we have creator of Boundary Break on YouTube. You can also find him on Twitch as well and Twitter at Boundary Break. We have Shesez. Hello.
Hey, what's up?
Not, you know what? Not much. Actually, a lot.
Ooh, now that sounds rough.
I got a lot of stuff going on. It has been an awful week, and it's only Wednesday, but it's about to get better because you guys are here.
Okay. We'll lay down on that
Oh,
couch
great.
and we'll talk about your problems.
Yeah. Let's talk about real life difficulty. Forget video games.
Yeah, real life is actually way. You think video games are hard? At least video games has accessibility settings. Life doesn't.
I can't go down to easy in life.
I cannot. True words were never said. No, so nobody can see this but the Discord call. But my Windows PC doesn't like me having the Elgato face cam in 2 different apps at once. So because I need everybody in position, I had to still have my webcam. So I'm using my other webcam, which is just facing a couch with nothing else on it.
Yeah.
Our view of Andrew is just the couch.
It's
Yes.
just, yeah. I mean, you can watch the stream and you can see me 7 seconds behind.
Top 5 things Laughingboy LP doesn't want you to know.
Uh,
He's actually the couch.
yeah, I was about to say, he doesn't want you to know his face. Thank you, Peyton. I know I'm doing great. Look, everybody will be able to see me at some point. So, let's talk about video games. In case you're new to the show, DialogBOX is a monthly podcast where I grab all the people that you like to watch and force them to talk to me about video games for usually about an hour. You can catch the show live with video over at youtube.com/laughingboylp and even join in the conversation in our live chat. You can also get the audio-only version of the podcast by finding your favorite podcasting service and just searching for DialogBOX, all one word. No UE in dialogue. It's no British version.
Is that a British thing?
I could do a British version of. Well, no, there's I think it's just an alternate spelling. I don't even think it's like a British American thing.
Okay.
Anyway.
I never knew.
If you want to support the channel, you can subscribe to the YouTube channel and check out the live streams where you can join and chat during the show, as well as our Q&A sessions exclusive to the streams. We just got finished doing a doozy of a Q&A session. You all missed it. If you want to help financially support the channel, you can also submit super chat messages, as well as become a member of the channel where you can use some awesome and exclusive emotes. They are made by both one Tabercadaber and one Miss Sayanella. They're very cute and awesome, and I love them. Hold on. Here, let me just spam the chat with
Let's
a
see 'em.
couple. There you go. Yeah, let's see. So show me what you got. Yeah,
those
there
are
we go.
pretty cute.
Kyle's a member.
Yeah.
Wheat.
Tweet. If you're not able to provide financial support, that's a-okay. Just seeing you in chat is good enough for me. And there are plenty of other ways to help the channel grow. If you like the video, you can let us know by hitting the like button and leaving a nice little comment. You can also support the audio podcast by checking us out and rating us on places like Spotify or Apple Podcasts. I know it's a thing. Or wherever you like to listen to your favorite audio shows with a rating system. Sorry, Dad, you broke. Look.
I just like the video. You should too.
Yes. Hit that like button.
Okay.
Apparently it turns pink.
Say less, King.
Say-
I got you.
I love the whole remember like in Twitter where people were like, Elon Musk changed the like button again, just to like trick you into liking the tweet.
I catch on
Just
to
that
things
very
pretty
just
quick.
like
I know when they're trying to bamboozle me.
I've learned the game. And with that out of the way, let's go ahead and move on to our topic. Difficulty in video games. Video games are hard, but they didn't used to be, or did they used to be? Has everything changed, or has nothing changed? So we'll kind of get into that. This is like a conversation that's just on and off like almost all the time on social media, and I've been wanting to do an episode about this for quite some time because I feel like there's like this huge disconnect, and to me, I find it really like intriguing because I feel like a lot of people kind of find worth in difficulty, or they find worth in like other things about the game, but there's such an emphasis about whether or not it was worth my money because the game was hard, or because the game, like, it wasn't worth anything because the game was too easy. And I don't really have any arguments one way or the other, but it was something where I was just kind of like, I would just want to kind of get some other people who play video games and see what they think about it. So I kind of want to go back in time a little bit, and we're going to start to go into like the arcade era. Alec,
Yes.
don't worry, it's okay. This was 20 years before you were born.
Damn it!
Wait, how old are you, Alec?
I don't know why he's singling me out. With me and Rebecca are like the same age, basically.
Yeah, that's
Are we?
Yeah, I'm like almost 30. 29.
Okay, yeah. I just turned 29.
okay.
Yeah, so.
Yeah,
So-
why are you
What's
singling
with
Alec
that,
out?
Andrew?
Yeah.
Why would you, you bring me here and
You
then
made
you
him sound like he was
victimize
like
me
10 years
this?
old or something.
Jeez, man.
Anyway,
Unbelievable.
so arcade games, we used back in the day, and this is even before my time. Back in the day, you used to have to play video games in an arcade, and you used to have to pay money every time you wanted to play, not just buy the game, take it home with you, and you could play it anytime you want. So a lot of arcade difficulty and what they call quarter munchers was the idea that you had to make the game intentionally difficult in order to get people to continue playing and paying for the game. When console games kind of showed up, I feel like a lot of developers didn't really make the transition very well, because a lot of people were just port the arcade games. Just take everything from the arcades and put it on consoles. We got them. But even like video games were like notoriously hard. Like, has anybody had like experience with like NES hard video games?
Of course.
Yeah.
Yeah, Battletoads is like the first one that comes to mind,
Yeah.
you know?
From arcades too.
Oh, from arcades, sure.
Well, yeah. Well, I
You
mean,
know?
it came from arcades. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. Well, I think like with arcades, it was the idea that like, oh, you don't want them to beat the whole experience of the arcade in such a short amount of time. So yeah, you put in the quarters just to have that opportunity, that chance. And so like that was their angle. And I do think that there was like a really bad idea of how to balance that. So it's like all the game developers knew at the time was we need to make it hard so that they can't beat it or get a high score really, really easily. But they didn't think about, you know, how to scale that difficulty. So you got things like Donkey Kong where like the barrels are just going absolutely crazy, and you know, like they hunt you down essentially and almost like program themselves to make sure you lose, you know, like having Donkey Kong the arcade experience on the Nintendo Switch and being able to constantly go through those gameplay loops, it makes you realize just how insane the developers were in terms of trying to keep the players pushed down from, you know, climbing up the leaderboards and stuff. So there was that. And then, you know, with NES, it was a different type of reason to make it super difficult. It was because they were battling, you know, rental companies. So they were like, well, we don't want the player to be able to beat it in one rental period. So what we'll do is we'll make these 5 levels of Contra stupidly hard so that they can't just rent it from Blockbuster and then return it like over the weekend or something.
I was thinking that too, with the Blockbuster stuff, and specifically comes to mind for that is the Lion King for Super Nintendo,
Yes.
where the developers are on record saying, yeah, like we made the first level easy, you know, the second level, you know, then there's like a huge difficulty spike on like the second or third level that's just notoriously so hard, and that's because they didn't want them to, you know, beat it in a single weekend. So that they would have to go and buy it, and then the rest of the game is just like normal. It's just like one really hard level towards the beginning.
That level you're talking about is the one with the monkeys, right?
I think so. Yeah.
Yeah.
Can't Wait to Be
Throwing
King
rocks
is
and
like
stuff.
the most notoriously difficult stage in that like 16-bit era. I remember as a kid I bought it, like I didn't even rent it, just because I was like, oh, it's a Lion King. Like maybe it had come out maybe like a half a year prior or a year prior, and I couldn't get DKC2, so I just defaulted. because they were sold out everywhere. So I was like, I'm just gonna get Lion King, I guess, because I couldn't walk away without something. And I didn't beat that game for another like 20 years.
It's so hard. I ended up buying it with on the Switch, that collection, and it has like the save states and the rewind, and there's some games where I just like don't have the patience to sit there and try it over again and over again when it's purposely built to be that difficult. Because going back, like, you're absolutely right, they had to be that difficult so that they could get the quarters, or so that they could, you know, make you buy it instead of rent it. And I also feel like back then, you know, you also didn't have as many game choices as you do now. Like nowadays, I want to try to get through my whole huge backlog. I have so many games that I want to play. Whereas back then, if you bought The Lion King, this might be your one game for like the entire year that you have to play as a kid growing up.
Yep.
And you can do it over and over and over again. I don't have that time now.
Yeah, games back then definitely heavily promoted playing outside instead. It was like, if that was your one
Just
game,
leave.
yeah, it made or braked a lot of potential gamers back then, for sure.
Yeah.
It's like, oh yeah, you know, he's 7 years old. Lion King is like the best game for him because he just saw the movie in theaters, and little did he know his soul was going to be crushed.
Man. Those kids, they hang out at the Salty Spittoon now, for sure.
I mean, that was the thing, and we'll talk about it maybe a little bit, but like, I remember just having to use cheat codes in order to skip levels, because there were just some levels where I'm like, this is nuts. I mean, you know, eventually as I became an adult, I became a, you know, big boy person who could actually physically play video games. I was finally able to like go back and play a lot of games that I hadn't beaten as a kid and finish them. Like even Battletoads is the one that I still have to use a Game Shark or a Game Genie in order to play, because I will just give infinite lives to myself. I can still die, but I give infinite lives.
So you said that Ninja Gaiden was one of the ones that you beat?
I did.
That's really impressive.
And actually, we just did a stream a couple months ago. No, a couple weeks ago. Ugh, a couple months. A friend of mine did beat it on NSO, but you know, we do save states and all that. But he was able to get through it. And it's, you know, I think one of the questions that I have is like, is there a definite difference between a video game that is hard and a video game that's just really poorly designed?
Yes.
Of course, yeah. In terms of just strictly difficulty, or just the general subject of, is it just designed poorly so it's almost impossible to beat because they just didn't program it correctly?
I think there's like a little anecdote in terms of Fester's Quest, like a notoriously difficult NES game where you basically have like one life the entire game, and if you die, you start the entire thing over from the beginning. And could you argue that game is meant to be hard, or is it just bad design that a marketing person went, no, it's not poorly designed, it's just challenging? Like, that's where I was kind of going with that.
Yeah, for sure. I'm sure there's like lots of developers that thought like, oh, this is just challenging, or hey, I designed my game perfectly fine, or like maybe I didn't have enough time to figure out if I designed my game perfectly fine. I have this intense timeline, you know, this this timeline, I'm sorry, what's the word?
Crunch, maybe?
Time crunch. Yeah, time crunch to get the game out on time. And so, you know, they don't have time to test it properly. And I think Fester's Quest is probably a great example of that, you know, with how the bullets kind of do the wave thing. And even when they do the wave thing, there's like lots of gaps, or it can actually hit the wall and stop continuing its fire because you're in a narrow hallway and stuff. I feel like that's something that the developers were not intending for that to be a thing. You know, if it's supposed to be like the maximum upgrade, why would you want something that's intentionally worse?
Yeah.
So that has to be like poor game design on the part of the developers. And I think that like there can also just be poor game design in the sense that like they wanted their game to be difficult, but didn't think about what's a good center for difficulty? Like, is it difficult in the sense that you can just overcome it by throwing enough attempts at it, or is it just difficult for the sake of being difficult and it's almost like impossible to beat because, you know, the developer just has spent like 8 months developing the game, and so they don't realize that with their amount of intimacy and their idea of how the game is coded, they can get through the game just fine, and not realize that the consumer will have a much harder time with it than they could have ever imagined because they never had play testers.
Yeah.
Like, play testers was something that came later in the game industry as well. It was not something, at least it was very uncommon during like the NES era for sure.
Yeah, and I think too, like there was this huge learning curve where designer or programmers had to kind of go from this idea of we are making games maliciously difficult in order to earn revenue, and now we don't actually need to make them hard. And so now we're trying to like move away from, and I think again, like there were so many things that were brand new in the NES era that we kind of take for granted these days, like scrolling left and right and going up and down, and not having single screen gameplay. That now all these developers are like, whoa, like the entire world just blew open. And now how do you kind of like make a decent game that you think is challenging, but not in a way in bad game design? And I also think that like, I think because a lot of people my age, like in our generation, were like, we kind of grit our teeth on older games like that. There's a part of me that's like, is there like a little bit of Stockholm Syndrome where I'm just kind of, do people just enjoy those types of games that are notoriously difficult because of poor game design, that they continue to play those games? And that's like, this is what I want now. And I'm like, but your life could be way better. So that's always, I think that was like the spark that like made me want to do this episode, was this idea that like people my age probably grew up on games that were hard, and as kids we were like, oh, that game's hard, but actually the game was just poorly made.
Yeah.
That's a fair.
You know, it's funny because you mentioned the Stockholm Syndrome idea, and part of it is I feel like you're not wrong. Like, with how difficult those games were, you know, we can sit here and dissect it and say like, yeah, that game wasn't designed properly, or it was just a product of its time because of the things that we already mentioned. But like, there are definitely players out there that rise to the challenge and take, like, I'm not personally one of those players, but like they take pride in the fact that they completed such a difficult game. Like somebody that says Battletoads, I beat that game and I used no cheat codes or whatever, like that is a huge achievement. It's a huge amount of bragging rights too. And so, you know, when you come off of that experience and then modern games, you know, scale their difficulty a lot more to a more common consumer, I'm sure there's a lot of people that came from that era that like look at that and be like, you know, it's nothing. This is like baby games, and I wish I had something harder. So, you know, it's definitely just like a per person experience for each thing. Me personally, I love difficulty scalers. I love when easy mode can still be engaging with the gameplay loops and not so easy that it kind of disregards the gameplay. That's when I feel like in easy mode it becomes a bad thing. One example of that would be like The Last of Us, where you can literally just cruise through the game with like no opposition whatsoever if you pick the easiest difficulty. And it's at that point, you're not playing a game anymore. You're playing a walking simulator. So, but, you know, alternatively, it's great that like there's a super hard mode in that game that really kind of pushes the game's mechanics to its limit for Mr. Battletoads guy that I mentioned a second ago.
Poor Mr.
You know?
Battletoads
That's
guy.
the best case scenario when there is level scalers and that you can pick, you know. And I think it's also helpful. Most games that have level scalers don't do this, but explain what the difference is with the difficulties. You know, is it going to be that the enemies do, you know, less damage to you? Is it going to be that there's fewer enemies? Like, I feel like there's a difference between those things. You know, and I feel like people might have preferences towards that, or, you know, it's helpful to know what that means, because if I'm picking between something that is like an easy, medium, hard difficulty, my train of thought is, I can only go based off of that, if I have experience with the series, if I have experience with the genre. But if you're going into something that's brand new, you might not know what those differences are. But I do usually appreciate when, it does have that differences, so that you pick, it's more accessible to people that way.
Man, that would be great, because seriously, like there was a period in time in my life where I just chose the path with the least amount of opposition. So, easy mode was almost always my go-to. But then it would be like something like Beautiful Joe, where you find out that you beat the game and it cuts content because you didn't beat it on
Yeah.
like the normal difficulty and stuff. And it's like at
I
that
think
point,
Cuphead does that too.
Oh, really? Does it?
I think so.
Okay.
If you play it on the easy difficulty, you don't get a couple levels at the end or something like that.
Oh man.
Valkyrie
I hate it when they
Profile
do
does
that.
Yeah.
I think Valkyrie Profile, the original one, you have to play it on hard difficulty, which for a JRPG wasn't common to have difficulty modes in an RPG. And yeah, I started laughing because I was like, I remember Disney's Hercules was like an early game that I had as a kid on the PS1. And you literally get to like the second to last level. And if you're on easy, it's like, play it on normal mode to get the full experience. And I was like,
Oh man.
what?
I hate that.
Um,
It's like, well, then why have that easy mode? It's sort of like it's teasing players for just not being as skilled as someone that could handle it on normal mode. But like, I feel like if you're gonna put in an easy mode, it's supposed to be an invitation for players that may not be that skilled to be able to play your game. So I've always, I would say, like, out of all the things that we've talked about, that is the one thing I would just like, without, I can't be convinced otherwise. I feel like that shouldn't be condoned. It's like, if you're gonna put an easy mode in, just allow the player to experience the full game.
yeah.
Like
Agreed.
Resident Evil 4 remake just recently. I did assisted mode, and again, it's just because that game can give you a whole lot of anxiety if you're playing on the harder difficulties. But by beating assisted mode, it still unlocked professional mode. So that was awesome. And then I literally did just go from assisted to professional just to see what the difference in difficulty would be. So
Pretty
I
crazy.
appreciate that they would do that. Yeah.
Alec, how do you feel about this so far? Picking on you again.
Well, I mean, it's funny that Shesez brings up RE4 again because, in a perfect world, I think a system like RE4's does the best to kind of cater to the most wide array of people as possible. So, like, for instance, not only does it allow you to choose which difficulty you prefer, but in those difficulties as well, the game doesn't actually tell you this, but, like, for example, if you die a lot in a certain section, it'll spawn more healing items for you. Or if you're doing like only headshots, 180, 360, like no problem getting through the game or whatever, enemies will deal more damage, they'll be more aggressive. It doesn't tell you this explicitly, but it's definitely felt within the gameplay. Once you like have that in your mind, you'll definitely start to see it a little bit more often. So
I feel so conflicted about that when like you're doing so badly with a boss or something, and then the game will be like, it's like a pity thing. It's like, oh, like we can tell you're struggling. Like, here's a health box, or here's a tip that is unsolicited that I wanted to figure out myself, but you're telling me the solution that I was just trial and erroring, and I was gonna get there, but you told me, and I didn't want to know. Zelda does that sometimes.
Yeah.
And like, part of me is like, okay, well, maybe I never would have been able to do it without that, but also like I didn't ask for this. So I feel very conflicted about those kind of things, Alec.
Well, the thing about it is that it's a lot more subtle, right? So it's not like
In
you die a
Resident
bunch
Evil,
and then it'll
yeah,
give you like
yeah.
5 healing items or something. It'll give you like 1 more than usual.
In
And
that
even
game,
then,
they
if you
do
die a
it.
bunch,
They do it in a good way.
yeah, it's very, very subtle to the point where I'm kind of like you, where I feel like okay, I'm being babied, but like
Yeah.
in this case, I feel like it's acceptable because it kind of just feels more so like relieving a little bit of the frustration that the game is clearly seeing that I'm going through. But even then, like, to take it a step further, for somebody who wouldn't maybe have so much of a problem with that, when you do make those repetitive deaths, it also does offer you the option to maybe just knock it down to lower difficulty, which is totally
Yeah.
fine. I mean,
Yeah.
I wouldn't do that particularly, but I like that it's there for somebody that who would want to take that opportunity.
It is one of the
Some of them are
coolest
hard.
ways of like difficulty scaling because as someone who died a lot in Resident Evil 4, the original, like it's not it's not felt, if I'm honest with you. If it just feels like I went through the scenario as if it was intended, but in truth
Yeah.
there was like one or two ganados that were like taken out of the equation, and like one box had the exact item that I needed, but I would have never known, I just
Yeah.
thought that like, oh, this is what was supposed to be in that box.
Yeah, it's not
But-
done in a mocking way.
Right.
Yeah.
And you know what is one great example of it done in a mocking way is Metroid Prime, where it's like, it's an exploratory game. You're supposed to go through and try to kind of figure things out for yourself. But really, like, if you don't take that much time at all to go from where your destination is supposed to be versus you going off and maybe not even trying to find the intended destination, but maybe instead trying to get an item that you knew that existed earlier in the game that you
You're
now have the tools to get to, it suddenly is like, oh, by the way, you're supposed to go over here. And it's like, well, thanks.
I'll get to it.
I'll get there eventually, game.
take
And I
my
appreciate
time.
that though. Yeah.
Jesus.
Yeah. And that's what I mean by unsolicited tips. It's like, okay, I wanted to figure it out myself, but Navi is telling me, hey, attack its eyeball. It's like, okay, well.
I
Right.
remember God of War Ragnarok apparently was like getting blasted because it was giving you the answer like 2 seconds after the puzzle was like given to you, and I think they had to like turn down, like, you now have a slider to make them talk less.
That's great.
Where it was just kind of like, as soon as a battle starts, Atreus is like, hit him in this place, and you're just kind of like, it just started. Like, give me a
Man,
break.
Who is you?
The game is literally backseat gaming.
It kind of is. It kind of is. And that all came from stuff like Uncharted, and that was like a selling point of like Uncharted 3, I think, where they were like, if the player takes too long, one of the characters is just gonna go, oh, hey, I found something, and then they'll like tell you to go over there. So I, like, to a point, it's helpful, especially to like kind of guide the player along. But once you realize it's happening, you can't help but feel like it's a little condescending.
Yes.
You know what game
100%.
is like really guilty of that? I should say game series is the Life is Strange games. So the characters will have like
Yes.
Oh my
monologues, and they'll be like,
god.
I should probably come back after I talk to this person.
Yes.
Horizon's
I should
also
really check
pretty
out
bad
that
about that.
bucket over there. It's like, oh, okay. I love Life
them,
is
but I hate
Strange.
them at the same time.
yeah.
I think Horizon was also pretty bad about that, because there would just be times where nobody talks to themselves that much out loud. But Aloy talks to herself a lot. And she's just
So
like,
much.
well, guess this kind of ammo won't work on them. And it's like, I just scanned them. I know that ammo won't work on them. I can read.
Let me experiment?
Yeah, let the experiment commence.
I
Boom.
shot once!
It makes you really appreciate games like Undertale, where it flips that whole convention on its head, and like, the opening of the game is Toriel, like doing all the puzzles
Yeah.
for you and everything.
Yeah.
And like you're supposed to feel that frustration, which is very nice.
Speaking of spelling out the puzzles, you guys just played the Resident Evil remake. I heard that they mark the boxes very explicitly that like are breakable. What do you think about that? Because like, on one hand, like, it doesn't feel unrealistic to me that like a box with ammo might be labeled ammo in real life, not just like a very vague box. But like, I could see people getting frustrated that it's like, oh, it's not
immersion
letting me-
breaking.
I will definitely let you take the reins on this one, Alec, but I will just quickly say, with the amount of features that the game has for accessibility, I'm surprised that one of them wasn't to turn on or off the yellow paint all over the boxes and stuff. I personally would leave it on because there's a lot that you can easily miss in Resident Evil 4 Remake. But like, I do kind of understand where it's sort of like, man, some dude in the world of Resident Evil 4 just had a paintbrush and a bucket of yellow paint and was going to town on everything.
Okay.
Yeah.
Some job security right there. Yeah, I mean, I don't know. I mean, I saw there's a lot of discussion about that, and I feel like a lot of this kind of started with the Tomb Raider reboot, at least for me, back in like 2013, where there's like everything that's significant has like, like a white, you know, like thing on the wall if you can climb it or something, and it's just become what feels like a trend at this point. But, I don't really consider it criminally offensive, to be honest, because like to Shesez's point, I mean, the alternative would be to just not have those markers at all. And then at that point, I feel like I would either just be walking around aimlessly, kind of like going up to this wall. Okay, I can't climb that. Okay, I can't climb this one either. Where's the wall that I can climb? Oh, it's this one. Okay, well, I wish there was a way that I could have known that. But whenever I think about it, I can't think of what would be a better way to signify to a player that this is where you should go without verbally telling them, which is what I would have a problem with, or signifying it through some way in the environment to like kind of draw my eye to it, which is what happens in RE4, which to me isn't like too bad. But I can't really think of a better solution to that problem.
Well, and I
And
think
you know
kind of where I'm
what?
coming
I
from.
feel like a lot of people get really like mad about how Metroid, especially the older Metroids, are like, well, how is I supposed to know that I could bomb that floor? Because like I'm talking about the 2D Metroid specifically. Because there's no markers. Like I know a lot of Zelda games have, if you can bomb a wall, there's a crack in it, and that's a visual marker. Whereas for Metroid, there's usually no visual indicator, and I think a lot of people do get frustrated about that.
Yeah,
But then there's
especially
other
gamers
people
that
who
have made a God of War game.
oh, that's
Yes.
right. That was a big
Yes.
problem, wasn't it?
Whereas, like, if we want to circle back to that, I feel like that particular room was very good game design, but that's a whole other story.
Yeah.
But then on the other hand, there are people who, say, well, I don't want a visual marker. I want to do trial and error no matter how long it takes because, that's the way it should be. So you're right, Alec. Like, I don't know what would be a good middle ground of I don't want an obvious indicator, but I also need something that distinguishes it from everything else.
Yeah. Yeah, that's kind of what I mean. Like, I would love for that not to be the case, but the alternative would be like, I don't know, just me walking around confused, which is not really a great solution.
Doesn't make
if
for
you
a
ask
great
me.
stream half the time.
No, not
Right.
really.
I think
So, I don't know.
I think where the problem is though is that games are in such high fidelity now that like in olden times it was pretty clear and obvious what things could be interacted with and what couldn't be because the color palettes kind of like made it so. And I feel like game design used to kind of be in a place where things were much more obvious, or if they weren't obvious, like in The Legend of Zelda, you would kind of like, go to school the next day and then somebody would tell you about something and then you would go and do it.
Or I feel like even scale, like there's only so many things you can try because the games are only so broad,
Yeah.
back then, especially if it's like a side scroller or whatnot. But, nowadays, these huge open world games, there's like literally like thousands of things you could try before figuring it out.
Well, not only try, but like it's hard to see things. And especially as I get older, it gets harder to see things.
Harder.
So, like,
Harder.
playing a PS1 game, I can kind of understand like what's climbable and what's not. But playing a PS4 game, the lines get more blurred. And so, and I know, Alec, you were talking about how you saw it in like Tomb Raider, the reboot. Yeah. But for me, I remember, because I'm like one of 5 people that had a PS Vita. I played Uncharted Golden Abyss, and I remember that one of the selling points of Uncharted Golden Abyss was that it was so easy to see what you could climb because everything was painted yellow. And I think the Uncharted series kind of went in that direction, and then other games started doing it. So now in Horizon Forbidden West, you can constantly click on your focus, and then you can see the rocks that are climbable, because if not, you don't know. There's no visible discerning like whether or not something is climbable or not. And then you have Breath of the Wild, where everything is climbable and nothing matters, and you can climb whatever you want. But in
Right.
games like Uncharted and Horizon, the climbing is part of like a puzzle, but you can just turn that off in the accessibility settings, which I did because I didn't want to bust my R3 button. in order to find what was climbable.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think like honestly, just a dip switch for it would be great. Maybe even mention it at the start of the game where it's like, are you a hardcore player that wants no hints whatsoever, or do you want a little? I would say like the wording is very important at this point, but you just say like a little bit of guidance that was intended for the game or something, instead
I
of
know
saying like
not-
we'll hold your hand.
Yeah.
Well, and
I know
even
not every studio has this capability, but the more things that you can customize to your liking, the better. I know The Last of Us does a really good job with accessibility settings and being able to change and tinker with a whole bunch of different settings. Whereas, a easy, medium, hardcore type, setting is not always a one size fits all. But obviously that's unrealistic for especially smaller studios, indies. Like they don't have the resources to do all of that. But in an ideal world, that's how I would like it to be.
Yeah, for
Yeah.
sure. It would be
Yeah.
great if more games did it. There's one that I can think of recently was Dead Cells that had like it's one of those roguelike games,
mm-hmm.
and I'm not really a fan of that of that genre, which you may say then yeah, that game is not for you then, but in truth they have a lot of accessibility dip switches, and I was able to tailor it to my experience, to the way I prefer to play my 2D side-scrolling games. So it had like set amount of live stock, and like it would just kind of push me back to a checkpoint, instead of completely losing all of my progress outside of like some unlockables or something. And I was like, this is amazing. I wish more roguelites would do that, because there are like these games that I think are expertly crafted, but I just don't love that premise of losing so much progress. So, and I guess we're seeing it more and more with modern games, which is just a big bonus. And it does cause a little bit of a rift with games that refuse to do so, like any From Software game, I suppose. I love those games and I'll play by those rules, but man, I can't tell you how many times I've seen conversations from either game journalists or even some people on Twitter saying like, well, I think it's absolutely insane that they would not have some sort of accessibility option for like easy mode or something. And while I could argue, well, there's a reason for that because of how they like to incorporate multiplayer into the game and everything. There's just going to be a subset of people that, now that they've seen the gaming industry evolve in so many ways, a game like Dark Souls or Elden Ring kind of strikes out. It's like it really stands out as this game that's just not playing by the industry rules or standards. So it's kind of interesting. It's just really cool to see like how, it's like on one hand, I am just all for accessibility options, but then on the other hand too, it is nice to occasionally have a game that just kind of says, no, this is the intended difficulty that we had for the game, and if you want to play it, you have to play by the rules that we kind of put in place. Because
Go ahead.
what's that?
No, go ahead. Finish what your thought, and then I will.
Oh yeah, the last thing I was just going to add to that was that because I am the guy who would pick the easy mode for almost any game, but because Dark Souls forced me into its set difficulty standard, there was an experience with that title that I would have never had if I was able to choose an easy mode, So in a way, I'm sort of thankful that I was pushed outside my comfort zone for that particular game, I guess.
That's a good point.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. I think that it's, we need to be mindful of not confusing accessibility and difficulty to be the same thing, because difficulty is a setting that we can choose to challenge ourselves, whereas accessibility is meeting the player where they're at for what they can achieve. There are some players that will never be able to do the things that other players can do because of a disability, or because of something that limits them in life, and accessibility options in games can help them do that. And so I think that's very different than, a hard mode in Dark Souls. And I have a particular bone to pick with some fans of, you know, some Souls fans who will preach about how difficult the game is and how it should never have an easy mode and should never have accessibility options because that's not what the developer intends. And I don't think there should be, you know, an easy mode for your Souls games if, you know, it's about being difficult, but to not include, like, to say that they shouldn't include accessibility options that would make players be able to do things that they just can't do because of disabilities, to me is wrong.
Yeah.
You know, I
Yeah.
think that there are things that, you know, just the fact that, you know, that so many people say that there shouldn't be accessibility options because they think that all that means is difficulty.
Yeah.
A
And
lot of the times when you say accessibility, it doesn't mean an easy mode. It means
absolutely. And you know what it is? So many people, especially on social media, they speak in absolutes. So,
Yeah.
you know, when they kind of like have blended or muddied the conversation of difficulty versus accessibility into
Exactly.
one argument. Yeah. And
exactly. Yeah.
and it's a shame too, because yeah, I mean, like any game benefits from accessibility options.
Mhm.
What does that entail? You know, that's the broader discussion, but it would just be wrong to say that, you know, no accessibility options for this game because that's what the developers intended, is ever a winning argument in my mind. I feel like that's something that can always be explored to some extent. It's just, yeah, it's just, there's definitely people that are proponents of the opposite side as well, where they say like, well, difficulty is an accessibility issue and I want my easy mode. So it's sort of like,
Mhm.
you know, there's just like, there's a lot of confusion from both sides and it makes the conversation really unpleasant, especially when you see the way that
Yeah.
people like to talk to each other on something like Twitter.
Totally.
What? Yeah.
Totally.
What?
What are you talking about?
Yeah.
I'm gonna give a shout out to the YouTube channel Game Maker's Toolkit. First of all, they have amazing videos in general, but especially their Designing for Disability series. They do some deep dives into ways that games can be accessible without it changing the difficulty, where, you know, it accommodates and it meets the player where they're at. You know, instead of just making an easy mode where things, you know, enemies do less damage. Like, that's not accessibility, that's difficulty.
Yeah.
What do you guys feel about save states and rewind features in a lot of modern mini consoles and emulation consoles? You've begun to see a lot of like save states. You see a lot of especially rewind features. Personally speaking, boy, do I use them a lot, like especially if I've beaten the game before. And now that I have it, it's hard to like let go. And there are times where like for example, I'm playing Super Mario Brothers 3 on the Game Boy Advance on NSO, and I'm just kind of like, I died stupidly, and normally I just let that go, but I'll rewind. Like, do I really need to do that? No, but I'm going to do that to apparently, I guess, like save myself a couple of seconds. Personally speaking, I really like the idea of a save state or just having really good checkpoints, because it allows me to practice the thing I'm doing bad at so that I can get better. And that's the one thing that I don't like about roguelites or roguelikes. And what a lot of people love about them, like they love that arcade difficulty and they love being forced back to the beginning. But for me, like I was playing Returnal, great game. I still can't finish it because game be hard. And game be hard mean me start over, and me start over mean make no progress. Like
I'll caveman viewers out there.
It really, like I'll be playing the game for like 2 to 3 hours and make zero progress, and that to me is frustrating. But to some people they love it. And so to be able to have like a place for me to practice the thing I'm bad at is really important to me, and I felt like save states was like a really good way to do that. What do you guys think?
Good point.
I think that save states are, honestly, it's sort of like the player can tailor the experience to their liking with save states, right? So, you know, if they just want to see the full content of the game and have a sense of, well, I accomplished this much and I enjoyed that and I got this far, and then, you know, maybe they'll say, maybe there's one player that's like, I did so much, but I know that if I die here, the game's going to set me back 20 minutes. And I think that that's just ridiculous. And I think that it would just make my enjoyment that much better to just rewind it a little bit and not get stomped by King DDD or something and and just move forward, you know? And I think that's totally fine. I think that, you know, if you want to use save states, whether excessively or just modestly, that's great because you're finding a way to enjoy whatever game you may have not enjoyed without save states. Now, the only thing that I know that becomes a bit of a hot topic is whether or not you quote unquote beat the game or, you know, accomplish the game or whatever. I don't know how the best way to word it.
Yeah.
And like people that say let's keep going back to Battletoads, like the guy that beat Battletoads on the NES, he didn't have save states back in the day, and he managed to overcome that intense challenge. And then someone plays Battletoads on Rare Replay and uses the save state or rewind feature and gets through it, and that person, which I think is silly, but the person that beat it on the NES may get offended by the idea that the person that beat it on Rare Replay was like, yeah, I beat Battletoads. And it's sort of like, you know, it does diminish the accomplishment, I guess. But at the end of the day, too, it's like, it's your accomplishment, man. Like, you can say, like, hey, yeah, I beat Battletoads without any save states or anything. Like, it's a big accomplishment. And I don't know why I'm telling everybody at the water cooler today, but, you know, that's my big
story.
accomplishment. Yeah, that's my claim to fame. But like, yeah, I guess like a lot of people that are just against save states, that would be like their big reason why, is because they feel like it invalidates you actually accomplishing the challenges of said game, I guess. But that's just me speaking for devil's advocate. I think that save states are fantastic, and I personally use them modestly. So I try to rise to the challenge, and if the game is just being a little too crazy or it sets me a little too many hours back, I might use said save state, you know, just to kind of be like, I want to see the end of the game, and I know that I'll just put it down and just move on to something else if I don't use the save state here.
For me, I'm the same exact way, where if I'm not, my general rule of thumb for save states and for looking things up on the internet, like instead of figuring it out myself, but looking up the solution or whatever, is if I'm not having fun anymore, then I do it. Because to me, I want to have fun when I'm playing. And I said this earlier, but like I have so many games that I want to play, and I have 2 jobs. I work full time, and you know, there's so many games that I want to play. And I just don't have the time that, you know, some people would back in the day to spend hours and hours and hours beating one level of a game. Like that's just not how I want to spend my time. You know, and so I think if you use save states, or if you look up a solution, or, you know, you use something like that to help you get through a game, that's still beating the game in my eyes. I'm not like a purist where you have to play it the way it originally released or whatever.
Yeah. I think save states are pretty sick. Like the benefit of them is that, kind of like Shesez was saying, they kind of allow you to, or at least for me in my case, kind of draw your own lines on when you feel like you would want to use them versus when you not, and kind of also, like, you know, Rebecca was saying, my line is usually when I'm not enjoying the experience anymore.
Mm-hmm.
So not only that, but also if I feel like I died to something that's not really my fault, and a good example of this is Pokemon Stadium. That game is goofy. It does not play by Pokemon traditional rules. The CPU cheats, and I'm not even joking. There are so many threads about just the way the AI works in that game, how it just ignores like any sort of stat debuff or like whatever that happens in that game. So I will use save states as much as I want in Pokemon Stadium, because I feel like that game is just badly coded, or like something's wrong with the AI in that game. It's just weird. But in instances like that, or when I'm not having fun, is when I will default to like, okay, boom, I will just go back like a minute, so I don't have to spend another 30 trying to get back to where I just was.
Exactly.
You know, so those are the lines that I kind of draw. But some people don't want to use them. It's fine. I'm not saying that. I'm not going to go to a water cooler and say I beat it without save states. I don't care. All right.
Amateurs about
Still
safe
beat and I
states.
enjoyed the game. You know what? That's fine. I'm gonna go back to my desk and have a good time about how I beat Pokemon Stadium last night. It was great. I got to experience it again without the frustration of having to do it the way that I originally did back in like God knows what year that was.
Yeah.
Time is a circle.
You pressed all the right inputs. You're still playing the game. You know, you still had to do it. It doesn't play the game for you. You
Yeah.
hit all the right buttons and you saw the credits.
Yeah.
You hit the power button.
Exactly.
The system turned on. You had the controller plugged in. What more do you want?
Yeah.
Um,
What about you, Andrew? What do you think about safe states?
I already talked about it, man.
Oh yeah, you're right.
No, I do. I firmly am 100% about safe states because, again, it allows me to practice something that I'm bad at. I think one of the things that we kind of get lost in terms of difficulty is like, you might bang your head against the wall by having to be forced back to a checkpoint if you have really bad checkpoints, and eventually you might get through it, but that doesn't actually mean you may have like learned anything from it. And so like I think about practicing an instrument, and like when you make a mistake, you don't just stop and go all the way to the beginning of the piece and then start from the beginning. Like that's a waste of time. You nail the thing that you got bad, you practice that, you do that a couple of times until you're like great at it. Then you can go back into it from a different checkpoint, or like you can go back to the game the way that the developer intended and play it that way without save states, because you were giving yourself that experience and you were giving yourself the grace to allow yourself to use something that other gamers might, you know, flip their nose at you or something about.
That's a good analogy. I like that analogy that you used.
Yeah.
Oh,
I mean, like, ultimately, it's gatekeeping when you try to tell other players whether or not they should or shouldn't use save states, right? Like, assuming that you're from the stance that they shouldn't use save states. And I just think it's like, ultimately, your experience with your games is your business. It's your entertainment. And that's really what games are at the end of the day. They're just entertainment. This isn't a competition, you know, unless you're literally competing. But
true.
like if I'm playing Resident Evil 4, you know, I think it's just really uncool to invalidate someone because they played at a lower difficulty than you or happen to use save states if it was allowed. So it's just sort of like, you know, let people enjoy it how they want to enjoy it. You know?
Some people like to feel better about themselves by putting other people down. And I think that's that case.
I mean, I really
Yeah,
think
100%.
it is. Yeah, I really think it is that like Stockholm Syndrome, where it's just like, you know, because I went through this terrible experience, it must have more meaning, and it must have more meaning than what you experienced, which was the easier. Like, and it's so weird to me, and it blows my mind that people do this, where it's like, I need to have the definitive version of the way that this game was played, or the way that this game was intended to be played. I have to have that. However, never play Banjo-Kazooie on the N64, only play it on Rare Replay. Like, anybody that talks about Banjo-Kazooie, they're like, just play it on Rare Replay, because of the whole thing where, like, your notes, like, disappear when you die. And that is so frustrating. You have to go and collect them all again. So, like, that it's funny how we'll have those conversations.
Developers themselves saying, like, dude, what were we thinking? You know,
there's that too. Like, they were just like,
They
we
had
didn't
to
intend that.
artificially, we talked about it, they had to artificially increase the length of the game by difficulty.
Well, there's that too.
You know, think about how many games only had like, you know, 8 or 10 levels back in the day, just because they, you know, just the limitations of the hardware at the time. Your game can't be 20 minutes long. Think of who's played Marble Madness? Anybody? It has like 8 levels in it. It's
if that, yeah.
If you can get through the game, you know, in one try, it will only take you 20 minutes maybe. But you're never going to get through it in one try because it's hard. It is so hard to do your first time playing it. And so you end up spending hours because it's so difficult, you know, and that's because there's only 10 levels. So they don't want people to beat it in 20 minutes.
Yeah. We need a new Marble Madness that does not try to just mess with the player in that way.
I love Marble Madness.
Yeah.
Give me a Marble,
there's so
give me
much
a
you could do with
racing
that
game.
IP.
Yeah.
I want a Marble Madness racing
Man.
game.
That'd be cool. That'd be
Remake
very
Chrono
cool.
Trigger and then Marble Madness after.
Yeah, that's the second on my list. One last question for everybody, and then we'll call it a night. But we sort of talked about this a little bit. But do you believe that the developer or the director's intent is more important than the player's ability to play it? So for example, and this was like a thing with Returnal as well, a lot of the developers of Returnal kind of went back to the game and updated it in order to make things a little bit easier, but the things that people wanted, which was like additional checkpointing or saves, like quote unquote save states, like a way to stop and start the game up again, they didn't want to do, because they were like, this is the way that we wanted you to experience this game because the story is so built into that functionality. But a lot of us, especially me, it's like, well, I'm never going to finish this game then because I'm just struggling. So for me,
I understand now that this whole podcast was a vessel to mess with Returnal's developers.
This whole podcast is just me just like crying out in pain that I had a very negative time playing one video game.
Yeah.
This is my therapy session.
Yeah.
What are podcasts if not just free therapy? Yeah, so but some would argue that when I buy the game, then I get to do what I want with the game regardless of your intentions, whereas some other people are like, no, you need to play it the way that the developer or the way that the director wanted you to play it. So how do you guys, what side of that coin do you guys feel like? Because I feel like it's a tough question.
It is so interesting because I was thinking about this like the entire time we were talking, because a lot of this can kind of come just down to opinion. But I think I'm going to start my point with this, is that video games are projects made by multiple people, usually, making decisions that they think are right. Now, when I say that, I'm going to go ahead and also preface this by saying that there will never be a game that pleases everybody. And that's just due to the constraints of the capitalistic way that we make creative things. So there will always be a deadline to meet. There will always be profits to seek, and there will always be things that sort of stifle what otherwise would be infinite, borderless creativity, right? I kind of pondered this point. This is kind of like a random thing, and then I'll kind of get back to what I was saying. I kind of pondered what Elden Ring would be, as monstrous of a game as it was, if it didn't have any sort of budget or guidelines or any sort of deadlines to abide by, right? Because it was already really good, but the nature of the world that we live in is that these things kind of determine how long a project takes and how much investment there should be and blah blah blah. So whenever games get made, there is somebody kind of determining like, okay, well, we're gonna put this in the game, we're gonna put this in the game. Obviously we can't say yes to everything because that'll just balloon development and things will just get out of hand and then the game won't get made. So there is a little bit of responsibility by the developer to kind of keep in mind who you're making the game for. And there's also, just a lot of that comes down to preference, right? Because we're all people. People make games and people have preferences. I don't have to agree with them. In the example of Dark Souls, I mean, the game is hard. I would love if there were disability, like accessibility settings and stuff like that to have a wider audience. Maybe it wasn't in the budget. Maybe, I don't know. I don't think I would agree with that either. But this is kind of like how it is, I'm not sure what everyone else thinks about that, but I don't really see there ever being any sort of reality where we'll have a game that just kind of panders to everybody, as much as that would be something that I would like to see, just because of the nature of the game development and the industry in like quote unquote.
I mean, I agree with you. I think it's idealistic versus realistic. And, you talk about game development teams and how, you talked about how there's so many different things that the consumers want, the developers too. I don't think that it's necessarily true to say that every single developer in Dark Souls feels the same way about including things or not. A lot of them are just, doing their job, and they might have a different direction of how they want to go, but then ultimately they decide to go in another direction because of the way game development works. But I don't think there's necessarily a developer's intention. There's a way that the game ended up because of a multitude of factors.
When I say developer, I kind of mean like the people in charge of making the decisions,
The
and they're kind of
directors.
like
Yeah,
it's like
yeah.
meeting in the
I know
middle
what you
as best
mean.
as you
Yeah.
can.
I know what you mean, but when people say the developer's intention, I think
Yeah.
that's very generalizing, and
Yeah,
it's
speaking in
not that
absolutes,
black
kinda
and
like
white.
Shesez.
It's really, yeah, it's not that black and white, I think.
Yeah.
So I do agree that I think that it is how the consumer wants to play the game takes priority. I mean, you're the one that's spending the money. It's your game. It's your free time. You got to do what makes you happy.
Well, and I think there too, like, do you have to have some acceptance that there's just a game that you're not going to be able to play, whether it comes down to accessibility or just difficulty? Like, I would love to play Sekiro, but if the game is hard, it's not that I'm afraid to play it because of its difficulty, but I know it's just going to make me upset. So do I want to do that to myself, like in my free time?
Exactly. Yeah, no, you don't. I mean, who wants to do that? Like, I don't know about you guys, but I play games to relax after a hard day of work. I want to, enjoy myself. I want to have fun. I don't want to be cursing and pissed off and like,
yeah, right.
And sometimes I am because it's so difficult, and there is satisfaction after a challenge. But if that's constantly how it is, like, I don't know, the achievement isn't really worth that much to me, but to other people, maybe they feel like that is what they want to get out of it,
Right?
And that's fine. That is totally fine if they do.
Shesez, how about you?
Well, so the original question that was posed was, if I remember this correctly, it was, do we fully respect the developer's wishes for as far as what the how they intend for the player to play the game, or is it more important for the player, right? Was that the initial question?
Yeah, pretty much, yeah.
Yeah, I would say, like, very confidently, it's all about the player. Like, modding exists because there's players that want something out of their game that they bought. And I would never say, like, I ever have an opposition to modding in any sort of way. Like, if someone's willing to put the time in to tailor a game that they really love to something that they want extra or more or differently, go for it. That's awesome. It's great that we can do that. And developers that try to, stop that from happening, not developers, publishers usually, I find that to be so bizarre. Yeah. Well, them, and many others, of course. It's bizarre to me. I get it. It's like, it's sort of like a gateway, I guess, to worse things for their profit margins or future projects or whatever. But provide those products for your consumers if you see that there's an interest there. But like, my whole thing is, no, absolutely not. Like, the cool thing about developing the game that you wanted to make is that it starts off that way, right? So you can tell the player, this is how I intended for you to play the game. And every person starts off with that copy of the game to decide, like, yeah, oh, well, the way you intended was fantastic. And there might be some players that think, like, I really like what you have here, but it would be really cool if there was just a lot less enemy health, or I had a lot more health, in Dark Souls or something. And the fact that you have the power to do that through modding is fantastic. And like, I will always recommend to somebody, like, if there's something that you think looks cool and there's something stopping you from experiencing it in video games, see if there's a mod available so that you can do something about that to tailor it to your needs. And I never stop and think, like, well, Hideki Kamiya would have never wanted me to play Wonderful 101, with a giant mech mod. I'd just be like, no, the giant mech mod's cool, dude. And I'm gonna play with that, and hopefully he doesn't sue me. But but that's my stance. Is literally like, games are, yeah, it's like you buy the product and the product is now in your hands, and what you decide to do with it from there, that's your business. Now, again, trying to make a profit off of a game that you bought, that's ethically questionable. But like, if you're just doing it for your own at-home experience, go to town. Do whatever it is you want to do with it. Make it fun. Make it more fun.
Yeah. Even ask the chat, do you think the developer's intent is more important than your gameplay experience? It was a unanimous no.
Yeah.
Unless I get
agree
like
with them.
a last second yes, it shows up. Nope, I ended the poll. Too bad.
Got him.
It's funny that they don't have a timer on these polls. I can just end them whenever I want.
Can I ask like a random question that
Yeah.
just came to my mind after Shesez just finished talking? I wonder if there would ever be a viability in creating a platform for people to make mods and then sell them within that same game, and then like share revenue. You know,
We do see that with some game publishers.
Did Bethesda try that? Yeah.
Yes, with Fallout and stuff like
And
that.
especially because Skyrim was being modded to bejesus and back, they tried to open something up for people to earn money off of it.
I heard that
another
was really bad.
example is Valve with hats and stuff like that for Team Fortress 2.
Yep.
So like people were
That's
modeling their
true.
own hats and stuff, and so Valve would actually
Hats?
buy that
Like
design.
Hats? Are you
Like
saying
hats,
hats?
like yeah,
Yeah.
like for your character.
You collect
So-
hats for your characters.
yeah.
Okay.
That was like a thing, and they kind of did this when Team Fortress 2 went for free to play. They gave everyone who purchased the game a free hat that basically said like I paid for the game.
Okay.
Yeah.
Because
Different
people
crossovers.
wanted to feel validation for having paid money for the game.
That's funny.
Yeah.
So you see it here and there, but
Okay.
definitely you see a lot more of the complete opposite, especially these days. No, but
Such a shame,
it is.
Such
It
a
really
shame.
is.
especially considering how much cool stuff is on the Steam Workshop, even.
Yeah.
Just like more of a general sense, but you know,
Yeah.
I wonder what
Good
it would
point.
be like if more people did that.
I mean, it's a big reason to play a certain game on PC, just to experience the modding community and what they have to offer. Because like there are just certain things you're not going to be able to do on, say, a PS5, unless they
Yeah.
just open that up.
I'm getting that a little bit with RE4. I need to buy that for
You
PC.
you got. I mean, everyone's got to get the Leon Tramp stamp and the hot
Yep,
pants.
That's the first one.
All right.
Not everyone.
Not.
But-
I mean, the thing that I loved about the tramp stamp mod is that I was like, it is so in place with the time that the game was released. Like that is how a person would have dressed in the year 2004. That I'm just kind of like, that's why I love it so much, because I'm just like, it's
That's true.
it's peak mid 2000s. Like it is so
Well,
good.
It was a mod for the original. That's why it came back for remake.
Yeah.
Ah.
It was a popular mod for
It
the
was a
OG
very
game.
popular mod. Yeah. Leon, so hey, Leon's a baby girl to some people. All right.
Yeah, that's true.
And that's how we're going to end tonight's episode.
Love it.
I just want to say a big thank you to all of my guests tonight. Let's just take a quick turn around the room and just let everyone know where you are and what you're up to. And we'll start with you, Alec.
Oh shoot, it's always alphabetical. I always have to go first. Hi, my name is Alec. I play a lot of Nintendo games and Capcom games over on Twitch. We just did RE4 for the first time, and I'm looking to do probably a run on Professional sometime in the near future. I'm kind of learning the run right now and see if I can get the subpar or sub 4-hour mark, hopefully. And I also do stuff on Twitter every now and then. So that's me. My hair is blue. I don't know. What more do you want from me?
Bluer.
Make it bluer.
Rebecca, how about you?
Yes, I am Forrest Minish on most platforms. I like Nintendo and other games, and I stream and I write about games. And like I said, I'm playing Advance Wars, and there's two difficulties. There's casual and classic mode. I will say that I am playing on casual mode, and the final mission took me 4 hours last night because it was so hard. Either I'm just really bad or casual is not that casual. But yeah, so that's what I'm working on. Playing the second game. Check out my review next week. Just talk to me about video games. I like games.
And she says,
if you type in Boundary Break on YouTube, you'll see a show where we basically take the camera anywhere we want to try to find secrets to do discoveries to some of our favorite games. Had to do it.
had to do it.
Nice.
Yeah. But yeah, it's just a cool show where we just take the camera and try to find interesting stuff that might be placed out of bounds and stuff like that.
Yeah. I mean, you just released an episode quite recently. Did you want to just talk that one up?
Sure. It was Guitar Hero, and this Friday it's Resident Evil 4 Remake with the voice actor of Leon guesting in the show. He's going to intro in and talk, in character and stuff. So it'll be fun.
Nice. I'm loving it. And if you want to find me in the podcast, you can obviously subscribe to the channel if you'd like over at youtube.com/laughingboylp. And you can watch the video version of the podcast live, including a special Q&A session for those of you who tune in early. You can also find the audio-only version of this podcast on Spotify or wherever you get your podcasts. Just search for DialogBOX, all one word. Come back next month for a video about streaming and mental health, because next month is Mental Health Awareness Month. So we will talk a little bit about content creation and burnout.
Man, that's snuck up already.
It's already Mental Health Awareness Month. I know.
I thought you were gonna say it's already Burnout Month.
It's already That's February for me. We've gone.
Isn't that every month?
We have gone and done that. It's every month. It's something that people say it takes 2 years to fully recover from burnout.
Wow.
I'm leaving on that. But until then, thank you for being in chat. Thank you again for my lovely guests for talking with me. And we will see you guys next time. Well, I'll see you guys next time. Maybe everyone else will see you guys. Well, it'll probably be a minute. I don't know. This has been another fantastic episode 41 of DialogBOX. Good night, everybody.
Whee!
Oh, how do I end this now? Oof. Ooh, how do I do that? I didn't press the right buttons. Oh, there we go.